Welcome, everybody, to the Case for Construction Culture podcast. I'm here with Jerry Sykora, a guy I've known for several years. He's safety manager for JDR Technologies, a subsidiary of Universal Services. And I am Tom Esch, president of Esch Consulting. Jerry, good morning.
Good
Merry
morning, Tom.
Christmas. Happy New Year. I'm curious about what JDR Services and Universal Technologies, JDR Technologies and Universal Services actually does.
JDR Technologies was purchased by Universal Services, I think 3 or 4 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Universal Services is basically underground, does a lot of directional drilling and with vac trucks, and they also have a group of people who do some power line work, some high
Uh-huh.
power line work. But
Uh-huh.
JDR Technologies is the telecommunications portion of Universal Services Inc. And what we do is we work on the cell phone tower. So if you see a tower driving, if you're as you're driving around, if you see a tower with antennas on it, those are the kinds of things we work on.
Oh, great. Oh, interesting. So you're involved with the underground world with Universal Services and the above ground world with JDR Technology.
Somewhat, yes. I work pretty much exclusively with the telecommunications
That
portion of the
that's
business.
that's what I thought. You're the above ground guy, not the
Yep,
underground guy.
right. Yep, yep.
Do they have another safety person involved with the underground work?
Yes, they have one safety manager over there. He handles a lot of the accident investigations and a lot of the work comp paperwork and that. And then
Uh-huh.
there's another gentleman who does a lot of the training
Mm-hmm.
for Universal Services. And both of them, spend time out in the field checking the crews to make sure they're
Mm-hmm.
doing what they're supposed to do, completing JSAs and wearing hard hats and safety glasses and gloves and all that stuff.
Nice. Nice. Well, if I'm not mistaken, Jerry, I think you helped me develop my tagline for the podcast, which is called The Case for Construction Culture: Best Practices for Balancing Safety and Production. Did you not help me do that, Jerry?
I think I remember us talking about it.
Yeah,
Yes.
you helped me. So thank you for that. So I want to begin just asking you, like, what's your case for construction culture? If you want to say a word about what you think culture is, and then what's your approach or your way of handling the cultural part of safety.
Well, I did look up the definition of culture, and basically my understanding of it is it's just a group system of beliefs and values. And so what we want to do is instill a belief that safety is important. I really work on trying to develop the belief that safety is as important as production.
Mm-hmm.
And having safety become part of the core values of the company. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that, happens up above me, with the management, they have, of course, the lip service to that, but also helping them to know which kind of actions to take so that, it really is part of the core value of the company.
Mm-hmm. Boy, yeah, it's super important. Yeah, beliefs and values. I think you're honing in on it. It's culture can be a hard thing to define. It's such a buzzword these days, Jerry. I'm sure you see it and hear it all over the place. And it's one of those things it's in a way simple, beliefs and values, but it's complex because it's also all these unspoken messages and sort of invisible rules. And somebody once said it's culture is that's the way it is around here. That was a pretty good definition. It's the way it is around here. It's kind of how we do things. And as
Well,
you
and
know,
I like that kind of a statement too, because it's more in line with what I would hear from one of the line employees. And
yes.
I really try to keep my language um I really try hard to keep my language to a place where they can, any line employee can understand what I'm saying. I,
Yes.
well, I was an ocean investigator for 8 years, I believe, and
Uh,
I was giving a company a citation, and I I was telling the foreman, because we always meet with the foreman on site, and I was telling the foreman that I'm going to be going to the office and I'm going to write up a report, and then I'll send the report to your company, and you'll get a copy of the citation in the mail. And he just said, well, what does that mean? And I just said, you're getting a fine. And I just really like to keep my language, as simple and direct as possible, especially with the line employees. And I also keep my language, I think, pretty direct with everybody else. I try my best to be really concise with my language and try my best to be very direct.
It's,
Um, so
it's
that
really good.
I want my
Yeah,
words to have meaning, not just a lot of word salad, just not saying a lot of things that don't have meaning, but I'd really like my language to be meaningful.
that's really great approach, Jerry. I'll bet that helps build good relationships, which is so much of what culture is about.
Well, relationships to me are everything. I mean, it helps with the trust, and it just helps with everything. To me, my whole real career really, I think, is based on having relationships, especially with relationships with everybody. Um, I I I I believe, and I hope this is true. I'd have to probably confirm this, but I believe that my best rapport is with the line employees. I believe anyway. This may or may not be true, that I work with them the best. It's harder for me to work with construction managers, and especially with the upper management.
Hmm.
That's just not something that really interests me that much, I guess. I really like being down in the trenches. I really like, talking to people. I really like solving problems. That, that
Hmm.
that's what I really like doing. And when you get into some of these philosophies of safety and this, it just kind of gets lost on me, and I just would rather, I guess, bury my head in the sand to some degree, and just talk with people.
Sure,
I do feel like I have a lot of that knowledge, but it just doesn't have the interest to me as actually being on a site and help work through a rigging problem, or even a personnel problem to some degree. I'd
sure,
rather work through those kinds of issues.
sure. So you really prefer being with the workers and being with the people
Yeah.
in the field and speaking simple language. And I know
Yes.
you have to work with upper management. That sounds like that's not where your big interest is, but I know you have to communicate with them at least, right?
Yeah. And right now I have a really good supervisor that I really feel like I can be direct with and honest, and somebody I can discuss things with, when it comes to safety issues. And I really feel lucky to be where I'm at now, because I get support from the vice president, and I get support from the construction managers also. I really do get really good support. I mean, I know I've done some difficult things. I've had to, shut down jobs that, are important to get completed, and I've never gotten any pushback for that. I mean, and
Hmm.
I purchase a lot of the safety equipment, and I've never gotten any pushback from any of the safety equipment that I've purchased either.
Hmm.
So I'm really in a just I think of the best situation of my career, really.
Boy, that's exciting to hear. Um, um, Tell us, Jerry. I know you work hard to shape positive, safe culture. Could you tell us a story or a situation where you were able to either bring about some change or influence a culture? Do you have a story or maybe a failure where you tried to bring some change? I know in my work, sometimes I try really hard and it fails. It doesn't go the way we wanted. Do you have a story of either success or failure or something in between?
Well, when I first got into telecom, I have one simple story and I think it's a pretty simple story, but I think it's pretty telling. The company, the first day I started, um, I had them inspect their trailer brakes. Now, before I started working for that company, the day before I started, I did some research, and you can go on the Department of Transportation website and you can find out all the different violations that the company has had from a
Hmm.
DOT standpoint.
Hmm.
And I saw that they had a lot of out of service because their trailer brakes were not working. So a DOT inspector will come along, they'll pull a truck over and they'll pull it in, they'll do an inspection, and they could test the trailer brake to see if the trailer brake is working. If the trailer brake is not working, then the truck and the crew has to the trailer has to sit there until that trailer gets fixed, and then it can be moved on. And that can be very costly when you've got a crew of four guys sitting in a truck,
Hmm.
and then somebody has to go get the part, then they have to fix it. And, that's a lot of time spent doing that. And I saw that they had a lot of these violations where the trailer brake was broken. So my first day there, I made them inspect all their trailer brakes, and there's a line of people waiting to get out of the yard because they weren't leaving until their trailer brake was fixed. And and the guy who hired me was, of course, a little nervous because all his crews were sitting in the parking lot because their trailer brakes were broken. And after we got them fixed the first time, then I started, checking them myself before they left the yard. And I was
Hmm.
checking them on sites, and I was just constantly checking it and constantly reminding the crews that,
Hmm.
to make sure that these are fixed because, it can seem like a small thing, but when you take into the account all the different times that this happened, all the time that's spent fixing this, it became a big deal. And eventually, there weren't any trailer brakes that needed to be fixed, and the guys were checking them themselves, making sure that the trailer brakes were fixed and making sure that because it's a big deal to get stopped. It's a big deal to, have a crew sitting there not able to move because their trailer is broken. But I think that kind of illustrates the whole system or the whole approach that I've had is you just got to have energy. You just got to have the energy to keep pushing it. You have to have the energy to keep plugging away at it, keep reminding, keep checking, keep reminding, keep checking, and eventually it gets ingrained in everybody's head that this needs to be done. Another way is, doing a lot of site inspections. I spend quite a bit of time on site, and I do quite a few site inspections. And as you do that, you make corrections. In the beginning, you're probably making quite a few corrections, but as time goes on, everybody knows what the expectation is. And I think the biggest part of developing that culture is setting the expectation and holding people up to those expectations. When I failed at that, it's just because I just didn't have I just didn't have the interest. A lot of things that we have to do is, it doesn't make sense to the crews, and quite frankly, it doesn't always make sense to me either. And it's really hard for me if I don't believe in it.
Hmm.
It's hard for me to make guys believe in it.
Hmm.
And sometimes I think, when you've got minor issues, it's almost best to just leave it alone because those, save some of your heavy hitting for the big issues,
Hmm.
because there's gonna be times when you really need to hammer on the big issues, and if you can kind of, I don't know, not be so picky about some of the smaller ones, I think that helps a lot.
That's really a lot of wisdom, Jerry. I appreciate, especially the trailer story is really interesting. You said it takes a lot of energy to keep pushing it, and it sounds like you've maintained the energy, and that's not easy. I've done some of what you're talking about. I've never been a safety person at your level, but I have been involved with change projects, and it takes a lot of energy, and I would say courage to stop
Yeah,
a job or courage to tell,
it
I don't know how many vehicles were waiting till the brakes were fixed. That's a great story, Jerry. I really love that.
Well, and
And
you're right. You're right about courage and confidence. And
yeah,
confidence to know that you're doing the right thing, and
yeah,
confidence
yeah.
that
Well,
confidence that you're going to be supported in the end too
yes, I was
is
going to
a
say that.
huge deal.
Did you have the support of the owners and leaders of that organization? Did they know you were stopping vehicles and fixing brakes, and did they support that?
I did tell them that I did tell them on the first day I'd be doing that, but I think they weren't expecting the extent of the problem that they were facing, and so they did get a little nervous towards, they got a little nervous after a while, but they didn't. I told them, but they didn't realize the extent of what was going to happen.
Yeah, interesting. So they didn't realize the full
It's
impact, but
Yeah, they supported it, but they didn't, like you said, they didn't realize the impact it was going to have.
I'll bet in the end,
But then,
yeah.
when you're dealing with safety, you're dealing with stuff, that didn't happen most of the time. You don't want things to happen. You want things to go smoothly. You don't want things to happen. So
I'll bet in the
sometimes it can seem like you're maybe not doing anything, but when you're a safety person, things aren't happening. That's kind of when you're doing a really good job, I think. But
It's true. It's true. It's like good facilitation. You don't even see the facilitator or
yeah.
notice them. Good safety people, if you're doing your job, you're not as obvious. Sounds like they didn't know the full extent, but I'll bet in the end they were grateful that you did what you did.
Well, it made a big impact because after a while, this is just not happening. People just aren't sitting there by the side of the
Yep.
road. It's
Yep.
just it's just not happening.
Boy, that's it.
Workers' comp is also, I've been a safety director before, and I'm not in that at that level now. But it's, you start to deal with workers' comp, and you can really have a big impact just on the financial impact on the company, especially with workers' compensation. But
Hmm.
I don't know how much, I remind our people a lot how much of an impact, just these little things like sitting on the side of the road because you've been put out of service, how much of a financial impact that can have in the company. And nowadays, a lot of companies, if somebody gets injured, they have to go take a drug test as part of the policy.
Hmm.
And always I don't think people always understand the impact that has. I mean, we had a guy recently had to get a drug test, and the nearest drug test facility was an hour away. So I mean, that took that guy out of production for 3 hours because of
Hmm.
very minor incident. Even
Hmm.
these minor incidents can really have an impact.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to remind our guys about that too, how just these minor things can have a huge impact on what's happening.
Yeah. And that can go both ways. It can
Yeah.
go a lot of ways. Minor things having a positive impact or a negative impact. What are some of the biggest challenges you've encountered, Jerry, as you go about doing the right thing, stopping work when it's needed or correcting people when it's needed? What are some of the challenges you've seen as you attempt to change cultures in the positive direction?
I would say just making it tangible to people. We have a safety committee, and I try to bring up things that are tangible to them because I'm working with people they're hands-on. They're hands-on people. They're not book learners. They're in this industry. They're in the construction industry because they're hands-on. And so
Hmm.
making something tangible, kind of almost something that they can touch, bringing, making some of these more abstract ideas, something that they can touch and understand is a
Hmm.
challenge. And I also think getting getting everybody to believe that safety is part of their job. I
Hmm.
mean, I do believe safety is as important as production in our company, but sometimes it can be the perception, at the lower level, at the employee level, that really, they talk about safety, but when it comes right down to it, production is more important than safety. And
Hmm.
trying to get, the forum and the CMs and everybody really on board with that, that production and safety are on the same level. One
Hmm.
is they both have to work together in my mind.
Hmm.
They both have to work together. It has to be almost a holistic approach that without anybody producing, there would be no need for safety. And without safety, then the production starts to fall and production starts to get affected. So they both have to work together. I want people to work. I just want them to work safely. And I want to help them to figure out a way to do these things safely.
Hmm.
To do things. And I sometimes I don't like the word safety because I don't know, it sounds kind of wussy to me, because
Hmm.
we're in a high hazard industry and they're macho guys. And
Yeah,
so I wonder sometimes if calling it something other than safety would be easier for them to get their arms around.
that's an interesting. What word would you recommend?
I don't know. I've thought about it. I haven't thought of anything right now, but um
Yeah,
so I
I
guess
don't.
I just focus on the not getting hurt and the impact of what the impact of getting hurt has on them personally and what the impact of getting hurt has on the company as a whole and trying to balance those two things. I don't want them to think that the company doesn't want them to get hurt just because we're not going to make as much money. I want them to also believe that the company doesn't want them to get hurt because they care about them as people,
Mhm.
not just as numbers. A lot of people that I talk to here, they left larger companies because they don't want to just be a number. They want to be a person. They want to be an individual. And you
Mhm.
get just some size companies and you're not an individual anymore.
Mhm. It's real important that, especially in building culture. You and I talked earlier about you have to build trust, and part of building trust is demonstrating care. And everybody knows the company also needs to make money. And I know plenty of companies that say, "Oh, safety's number one," and then their behavior says that it's not number one, that the production and the dollar is number one. How do you demonstrate that care, Jerry, in a culture where you also have to make money and it's competitive? And this year, a bunch of companies, my clients, had some tougher years this year. How do you keep the demonstration of care in the context of we got to make money, Jerry?
Well, I don't focus on the making money. My that's not really part of my job as I see it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to put it, but I,
Mm-hmm.
I think part of my job is to demonstrate that care. I think
Mm-hmm.
part of my job is, part of how I try to do it is just saying hi to people, knowing their names, and just talking to them. And they've had experiences with me also. They've had experiences where I've maybe helped them a little bit on a job.
Mm-hmm.
That somebody needs an extra little bit of a hand, so I'll give them an extra hand. I'll maybe tag a rope or run the
Mm-hmm.
capstan so that the foreman can focus on something else. Or I just try to make myself available. And
Mm-hmm.
when you somebody becomes more familiar with you, then they they start to trust you more. And they've also had experiences with me that, they've told me something in confidence, and I've kept their confidence. I haven't brought their name into something that
Mm.
they didn't
Very
want their
important.
name brought into.
Very important. Super important in my work as well as a coach. Maybe one last thing, Jerry, as we're getting towards the end here, unless you want to add something after, but what are the big challenges that happen sometimes around seniority and rank? When somebody pulls rank or says, "I'm in charge, you have to do what I tell you to do." How do you handle that as a safety leader?
Well, I think I tend to try to stay out of that a little bit, because unless it's a safety issue, I don't. I try to stay out of that a little bit.
Hmm.
I do make myself available to the foreman as well as the newest guy on the crew. I try to
Uh-huh.
be just available so that I can hear those kinds of things. Sometimes I might whisper in the ear of a construction manager. I might do something like that. And our construction managers are pretty smart. They know they know when somebody's overstepping their bounds.
Hmm.
But it's a tough balance because really the foreman or is I mean he's responsible for getting that job done, and if it's not really a safety issue, I tend to let the foreman do his thing. Sometimes I'll say something to him, like if I don't like the way he's talking to somebody, that kind of thing, I might say something, but it'd be have to be a real gentle thing. It'd be a real because it's really he's responsible for that job, and it's kind of it's kind of tough to especially if it's working for him and it's working for the crews.
Hmm.
Um, if it's usually not a problem unless people are leaving, and I don't think that's really happening with any of our crews. Our foremen are good people persons, I think. I mean,
Hmm.
I really think they do a good job
That's good.
of handling their employees.
Uh-huh. That's good. Then
Um,
you don't need to intervene. And I like the wisdom of kind of letting them work it out. But I also know there are cultures where pulling rank is a safety issue, where the lead person makes decisions and doesn't consult others, and they sometimes change the work plan, and there sometimes have been deaths that happen. Sounds like in your culture, you have good leaders doing the right thing most of the time and not pulling rank.
well, they don't really have to. I don't think for the most part they have to. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's pretty well understood.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think they've had to do very much of
Mm-hmm.
that.
Sure, some of that is systemic. If the organization is really well structured and the job descriptions are clear and everyone is onboarded properly, it makes your job a little easier, does it not?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Very
So
much.
it sounds like you
Yeah.
have that. Well, Jerry, I want to wrap it up here in a minute, unless you want to add anything or ask anything of me.
Oh, I'm good.
But how can people find you, or how can they find JDR Technologies or Universal Services? You guys are doing good work here in Minnesota and beyond Minnesota, I'm sure, right? You're around.
Yeah. We're in
Yeah,
the Dakotas, Wisconsin,
that's what I
Iowa,
thought. That's what I thought.
Nebraska.
How can they locate you guys or you?
Well, I guess I never thought about that, but just Googling Universal Services Inc. I
Sure.
would probably be the best
Perfect.
way to look. So
Perfect. Excellent.
getting a hold of me, I guess they can contact you if they want to get a hold of me. And
Contact me and I'll connect you to Jerry
yeah,
Sykora, Safety Manager for JDR Technologies.
yeah.
And I appreciate your time, Jerry.
All right.
That
Thank
ends the
you.
podcast for now.